Okay, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Christina Ung. I'm on the marketing team and I help facilitate our KETIV Virtual Academy sessions. I'm so happy to be back here with all of you today. Today we have Austin Purvis. He's kind of a new member on our team, but we're so excited to have him here. Today's session is entitled Optimizing Configuration, Pricing, and Quoting Strategy for Maximum Impact. If this is your first session, welcome. And if you're a returning learner, welcome back. We're so happy that you're here and want to learn more about the world of configure, price, quote. We want to invite you to our upcoming Manufacturing Leaders Exchange. We have one coming up on April 24th in San Jose, California. So if you're in the San Jose area, be sure to check it out. I'll go ahead and drop a link to the session in our chat here. And we also have a session on, I want to make sure I give you the right date, on April 17th. That one you can join virtually, so anyone in the world can join. And this is an opportunity for you to meet with people in your industry and people in manufacturing to discuss the strengths, weaknesses, ups and downs, anything that you like to discuss. A nice networking event for all of you. So be sure to check it out. And you can check out other events as well by following that QR code on your phone. At the end of today's session, you'll see a link pop up on your screen to give us feedback, and be sure to fill that out. Let us know what sessions you would like to see. Let us know how today's session went. Give us feedback. It helps us make this program better for you. So without further ado, I'll let Austin take it away. Thank you, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be a part of the team here at KETIV, specifically on the CPQ side. But today, as Christina introduced, we're going to talk about optimizing configuration, pricing, and quoting strategy for maximum impact. Quite a mouthful, but we'll dive deep into it and kind of talk about the best way to plan for a CPQ implementation. And whenever I say CPQ, I'm talking about configuration, pricing, and quoting. So the agenda for today, a little bit about me and what I do at KETIV, and just some of my background. And then we're going to go through kind of understanding the importance of optimizing your CPQ strategy. And then we're going to actually go through item by item for configuration, pricing, and quoting, and talk about some of the best practices. And then we'll finish off with a real world case study looking at a customer that has implemented CPQ and has optimized their strategy and what that's done for their entire configuration, pricing, and quoting process. And then at the end, we'll have a little bit of a Q&A, and y'all are welcome to ask any and all questions that you have about this topic. So let's dive right in. So a little bit about me. I have a background in aerospace engineering from the University of Oklahoma, so Boomer Sooner. I started off in the defense industry and then made the jump over to technology, where I worked for various CPQ softwares on the implementation side. So after the sale happened, I would meet with customers, talk about how they wanted to implement CPQ for their organization. I worked specifically with manufacturers. And now I've come over to KETIV as a solutions engineer, so helping customers figure out what their strategy should be for CPQ, if Tacton, which is the CPQ solution that we use, is a right fit for manufacturing customers. So that's a little bit about what I do. But now let's talk a little bit about the importance of optimizing your CPQ strategy. And there's three kind of main points that I want to touch on. The first is the reason you want to optimize the CPQ strategy, right? Not only just implement it, but you want to continue to improve on it, is you want to improve that sales efficiency. So you want to sell more. I saw a statistic the other day that was saying sales reps typically are only spending about 40% of their time selling, while the rest of their time is spent on administrative tasks, generating quotes, going and trying to talk between teams, and it's taking up and eating a lot of time, which could be spent with potential customers and actually selling and pushing your products. And so by implementing not only a CPQ solution, but optimizing the strategy that you're using and how you're implementing the solution, your sales reps can spend less time on those administrative tasks and spend more time on what's important, which is in making those sales with your customers. Now, additionally, and I'll get into this further, but automating the quoting process you can easily and accurately generate quotes, accurate quotes, valid quotes. And you'll see that in our case study later, which was really exciting, is how what the company that we're going to look at went from a quoting time of 4 to 6 weeks to get a quote out the door from talking to a sales rep to only a couple days. And they had some approval processes and things like that, but it was very quick, very snappy. And so they can really see by optimizing their sales strategy optimizing the CPQ strategy that their sales efficiency went way up. The other two things, and I won't spend as much time on these, but you want to enhance your customer satisfaction, and then obviously you want to increase your revenue and profitability, and that's so some of the importance of why you want to optimize that strategy. And so you want to look at how you're going to implement the CPQ solution. You want to see, for example, for enhancing customer satisfaction, what you're selling, what's selling well, and how you can improve on the products that you're selling. You can reduce the customer churn and increase customer satisfaction by optimizing a CPQ solution. So leading them through the process of configuration, leading them to a simple quote that they can see exactly what they built, exactly what they're buying, and how you're going to build it and why it's priced the way it is. You're going to have that specific bill of materials. So you really want to work on that customer satisfaction, and CPQ can definitely aid with that. And so those are kind of the three main bullet points that come to mind of why you want to optimize this CPQ strategy. And coming from implementation myself, I feel really passionately about that. I love seeing when we help manufacturers kind of build up their customer satisfaction. Obviously, it's great to help y'all make more money, see higher revenue and profitability, and then just improving that sales efficiency overall. I love efficiency. I love getting things done, in a quick but reliable way. And so that's why I'm a huge advocate for CPQ. I've worked with different softwares and seen what's out there. And I think it's great to really think about this topic. And that's why I'm excited to be talking about it today. So we're going to jump into the three different parts of CPQ: configuration, pricing, and quoting. Configuration, we're going to talk about some best practices. And then I have a little video I'll show you that just goes to show kind of what some of those things some of those features that you can add in that could result in a better customer experience to get a good configuration where they can kind of go through and figure out what they want to buy from you. So the first thing is you do want to understand customer needs and requirements, and you do that by asking the right questions to your customers, going out and talking to them. What are they looking for? What are pain points that they have, and why are they coming to you for your product? When they're looking at your product, a lot of times it's unclear on manufacturers' websites, what goes into making the product, what the pricing is, the lead time that it takes to get this. But if we're focused purely on configuration, there's a lot of confusion on, what goes into this configuration, what can we add, and maybe more importantly, what can't we add? And so you want to create a configurator that is easy to use and easy to understand. And that's something that was really fun on the implementation side, is working with manufacturers and optimizing their strategy for how do we actually want to present this to the end user. And there could be different groups of end users, right? You can have your end customer, you can have distributors, and you can have your internal sales team. Those are all end users, if you will, of this CPQ software. And so you want to provide clear instructions and examples. That's one thing that I ran into a lot that I really harp on during implementation processes, is you want to guide your user, whoever it is, through the process of configuration. And just make it really easy to use, easy to understand. You want to limit the number of options and choices. If you sell, 50,000 different things, you don't want to present all that in a drop-down menu where the user has to go in and search for exactly what they want. You're the professional, and thus you want to kind of lead them through that entire configuration process, in an easy to understand way. And then another best practice that to think about when either if you're thinking about implementing CPQ, or if you already have a CPQ solution and you're thinking about how you can optimize your strategy, is you definitely want to implement error checking and validation. So you want to add constraints, you want to add calculations that make sure that you're always selling valid configurations, because there's nothing more frustrating than talking with a salesperson, trying to buy a product, and then you wait for several weeks for a quote, and you come back and you tell the customer, I'm sorry, that's an invalid configuration. We're going to have to do this whole process over again. And so if you can implement verification that the configuration is correct and complete, without your engineering team or with minimal approval process from your engineering team. That's where you want to get to and think through that process of what is a valid configuration and what are things I can and can't add that would make it invalid. And one of the beauties about Tacton is it does provide suggestions for correcting errors. So if you pick something that's not necessarily correct, it'll provide different suggestions for maybe if you chose a different arm for this for a bottler machine. Maybe it doesn't fit with the length that you chose. You can either change the length or you can choose a different robotic arm. So those are some examples of maybe how you can think about configuring better. And I'm going to play this video as we're let's see here. Yes, there's a little video going on about this visualization. As you're thinking through how am I going to create my configuration better, you know, think about the features you can add to make your user experience better. Do I want to add visualization? Is it useful to show my customers, what this is going to look like? You can see right here, you can see this this cart in a doctor's office, and you can see it next to the doctor. That might be useful for this, but it might not be useful if you're selling maybe something like air duct vents or maybe maybe doors, right? You don't necessarily have to see that. It still could be very valuable, but what are the priorities for making sure your customers have a good, clear configuration process? And then while this video is finishing up, the last thing is you want to provide clear and concise documentation. And that kind of goes back to what I've been talking about on this slide, which is you want to create detailed and accurate bill of materials from the configuration, and you want to provide clear and correct and concise instructions for use. And so whether that's kind of the terms of service, whether that's instructions for how to use your product, it'd be great to have that. And I recommend manufacturers when they're selling and quoting products that they send out the door with the customer documentation for how to use their product and how to how to best utilize it so that your brand continues to thrive and has a good reputation and your customers are continually satisfied. So if we move on to the pricing section, and I'll probably jump back and forth between configuration, pricing, and quoting because they're also interconnected. But some of the best practices for pricing is I recommend that you understand the costs associated with producing your product. So what is the cost of raw materials? Understand what is the labor that goes into making this configured product. Because if each product is completely different, the labor might be a little different, but you can draw some similarities between the cost of labor by, calculating if it takes this much to roll this sheet metal, if it takes, this much to move it and put these together. You can calculate those and put those into the configuration pricing and quoting software to come up with an accurate price for your customer. Because that's frustrating as well as getting a quote and then learning it's going to be more because the labor is going to cost you more or it eats into your bottom line. And then the other thing is you want to factor in your overhead costs. The other thing is you want to implement a pricing strategy that takes in, what's saying on the slide here, but market conditions, competition, customer value. Uh, Determine the value that your customer places on the product. I think that's always a really difficult thing to recommend. It's easy to say, but difficult to do. And so a way to do that is to actually talk to your customers, go out, see kind of what's the value that that your customers place on your product. How are they using it? And you can kind of, estimate and even ask them, kind of how valuable is this product to you? And that can go a long way in determining your pricing strategy and setting prices that are competitive yet fair, because you want to find that happy medium between the two. And then the last thing, which is a huge benefit with a CPQ software, is utilizing data and analytics to inform pricing decisions. And that's what's really cool about different configuration pricing and quoting softwares is you can collect and analyze data based on the sales, the costs, the marketing conditions. You can make informed pricing decisions based on what people are adding, what they're not. You can see what people are ordering a lot, what you're selling a lot. Maybe you have a couple different configurations that are selling a lot, and maybe you have some more complex configurations that aren't selling as much. And you can adjust the prices accordingly to reflect the value that that a lot of your customers are getting off those few configurations. And then the last thing that I like to harp on, and it's really a benefit of CPQ that I've seen, especially from what's the word? established CPQ vendors is that they're really easy to maintain. And the reason I say that's important and beneficial is because you want the ability to review and adjust your pricing as needed. A lot of homegrown solutions, although not impossible, can sometimes be very difficult to update, whether that's something on the configuration side or the pricing or even the quoting side. I've talked to a lot of different customers that have moved over to a larger vendor like Tacton, and they've had a hard time maintaining their records, maintaining their configuration, pricing, and quoting, maintaining their pricing strategy. They've had to kind of go in and hire a third-party developer, and so that's been difficult. And that's why I really harp on the configuration, pricing, and quoting softwares because they are a lot easier to use, a lot easier to maintain, and so that's another just big benefit and one of the best practices that I would recommend for pricing. And the last part, the Q, the of configuration, pricing, and quoting, is there's a lot that goes into this. And one thing that I may have already said already, but it's this 20-80 principle. I think it's called the Pareto principle. And so as kind of the diagram shows here, 20% of the effort tends to lead to 80% of the results. And it's identifying, what is those 20% of maybe, and what I said before, configurations that are leading to 80% of your, sales. A lot of times too, it goes along the lines of 20% of your, or 80% of your errors come from 20% of the configuration options. So if you have, 20% of what you offer, if a fifth of what you offer is super complex, super difficult, there's always invalid configurations, and maybe it's accounting for 80% of the errors, but the other 80% of configuration options, they are responsible for only 20% of the errors. And so it's focusing on those 20% of configuration options. How can you quote those easier, configure them without as many errors? What's causing so many errors? And kind of thinking about that. But when we talk about best practices for quoting. One thing I like to say is you want to create accurate and detailed quotes in a timely manner. And the next slide, when we talk about our case study, we'll see that they are really doing a good job with optimizing their strategy because they're creating really clear quotes in a very timely manner. You want to make sure they're correct. You want to make sure that you are allowing your sales team to provide clear and detailed information to the clients, and you want to be able to respond promptly. Like I said at the very beginning of the conversation that we're having here today, is a big issue that I've seen in manufacturing is that quotes take several weeks to get out the door to the customer. And in the meantime, that could be a lost sale. They could be uninterested anymore. And so if you can get that quote to them quickly, your churn rate will go down. The other thing is you want to make sure you're communicating clearly. What are they going to get? What's the bill of materials if that's something you're providing to them? What's included in this product? What's the labor breakdown? What's the cost of materials? And you build your margins into those as well. But to the customer, you want to be very transparent with what's going into this product. Since it's a customized product, why are you pricing it the way you are? And you outline all that in a very easy to understand quoting document. And you can have the beauty of CPQs, you can have different documents for different stakeholders. Your sales team can get an internal document that really shows them the price of things and maybe their maximum discounts that they can give. But for the end user, you don't want to show them all that. Instead, you want to show them a really clear to see itemized list of what they've bought, maybe when it's going to get delivered, when, all the different things that they might need to know about your product. And then the other thing, a good practice that I like to preach is to follow up on quotes and provide additional information. So CPQ softwares, they can provide all the information that you want to put into them, and it can provide it to the client, it can provide it to the salesperson, but you don't want to over inundate your end customer with just tons of documents, 100-page, quote, which they're not going to read. But if you provide them with a very simple quote, something that's detailed yet valuable, and then maybe they ask the salespeople, your sales representatives, clarifying question. In the CPQ software, you can have additional information, additional documents, additional parts of the quote that can help aid the sales representative with aiding the customer without them having to go to engineering, without them having to go and look it up. And so you can kind of structure your quoting strategy by equipping the appropriate stakeholders with the information that they need. And that can all come from a configuration, pricing, and quoting software. And then, kind of the whole reason that we're talking about this is, you want to utilize technology to automate and streamline parts of the quoting process that you can. There's some parts that might not be ready or applicable right now for a CPQ implementation or an optimization, but I guarantee there usually are parts of quoting that I've seen with manufacturing customers where they can streamline and automate, generating 2D CAD drawings, generating 3D step files for the engineering department, generating documents, bill of materials. There's lots of things that you can automate that just take some of those menial and tedious tasks out of the equation. And so a good example is with this case study that we're about to jump into, and I'll just go to that right now. So Clearstream Environmental, they're a user of Tacton CPQ, and they're in the water treatment industry. They make water treatment systems. So these big, complex systems. There's a lot that goes into them. And the thing is, if you have one of these systems, they have a diameter, right? And if you change that diameter by just a foot or even just a couple inches, it changes all different parts of the system. The arms that go over and attach to the side. I'm not going to claim to be an expert in the water treatment industry or in those systems, but there's a whole host of things that can change because it's such a complex product. And so before, what would happen is, customers would call in, or the sales rep would get somebody who might be interested, and they would get all the information they'd need. Then the sales representative would go and talk to the engineering department, would go and talk to the proper stakeholders. Engineering would go and prepare a quote, go back and forth, and they'd get that quote together. And it would take about 4 to 6 weeks to actually get that quote back to the customer and get their custom design with the drawings. And if they rushed it, there could be some things that weren't quoted correctly, and that resulted in maybe some hits for Clearstream in terms of some of their profit. But they implemented Tacton CPQ, and now it takes 2 days to get a CPQ solution or to get their configured product out the door with a quote. And so what that looks like now is the salesperson can go in, they can click through the configuration portion, they get the price right there while they're on the phone with the customer, and then they can actually get the quote out to the customer. And the reason it can take a couple of days is they have an approval process. And so instead of engineering having to start from scratch, they can actually go in and in the CPU software get a notification that says there's something for you to approve. They go in, they can see some of the drawings if they're there, they can see what's being quoted, they can see the system, they can go through, they can make adjustments, they can reject it and send it back to the salesperson and say this isn't a proper configuration, or they can go through and change it themselves. Maybe the diameter, they don't offer it like that, and the engineer can go and change that. And realistically, the configuration pricing and quoting software should take care of all of it, right? There shouldn't be any issues, but this allows for extra steps of validation to make sure that you're never selling an invalid configuration, which is awesome because and and as you can see here on the slide, now they're highly competitive in their bidding process. They're quick. Their customers have the quote in hand so that whenever they're getting, maybe different quotes from other customers, they can compare that to the Clearstream environmental quote and they know it was quick, it was accurate, which is really important. And one of the things that they've noticed is their hit rate has increased dramatically. They have quotes that are being accepted and going through and becoming a sale, and they're getting to sell their products, which are world class. And so I like this case study. I like how this company, Clearstream, has implemented configuration pricing and quoting software. And I think just to kind of reiterate what we talked about here today is, when regardless of if you're planning a configuration, pricing, and quoting implementation, or you already have a CPQ software, it's really important to think about those 3 different parts of CPQ: configuration, pricing, and quoting. And how do you optimize each area? For configuration, look at what your customers are actually going to use, or the end user, whether that's customers, distributors, your internal sales team, how are they configuring and going through the quoting process now? What do they want to see? How can you make it clear? For pricing, how can you have competitive and fair pricing in the industry? And you can do that by talking to your customers, by deciding what the value is they put on your product. And then the last one, quoting that we just talked about, how can you provide good documentation quickly? And how can you provide good documentation quickly and kind of give that to your customer and have confidence that it's a valid configuration and a valid quote that you can actually deliver on, and give a good customer experience. So there's a lot there, and we're more than happy here at KETIV to answer questions about that, or to talk about that more. We're really excited about CPQ. We love specifically Tacton. We've seen some really great return on investment for that. I've been in the CPQ industry for a little bit, and I've seen some of the different softwares out there, and I've just loved seeing how manufacturers can benefit from it. So we're always here and want to help and want to be a partner to you if you're thinking about optimizing or implementing something new. So the last thing I'll leave you with is when you go to optimize your plan, make sure that you go through and identify those different areas for improvement that we talked about. Create an action plan. Write it down, talk to somebody, have an owner of who's going to make that happen, and then actually go and execute on it, implement it. And so I think um, that's really all I have for today. I really hope that you feel comfortable reaching out, and I really hope that you learned something valuable from that. But for now, we will open up the floor. If there are any questions, we're here to answer. I think down here in the chat, you can answer your questions, but we'll be here to answer if anybody has anything. Thank you.